So I want to talk about the idea of a state-run media. I think it's something that got brought up a lot when Obama was in office because it seemed to be telling, and I think it's actually even more telling now that we have President Trump. And I think it gets lost a little bit on people now that Trump is the president because they see him in power and then they see the media just dogging him nonstop. And I'm talking about media. I'm talking top to bottom. I'm talking everything from news networks all the way down to the late night hosts that do nothing but bash Trump. Um, and I think people lose sight of the idea of a state-run media, especially in the United States, because it doesn't tend to show the way it does in other countries where they have dictators and things like that, where there's always the person in power that controls the media. In the United States, since we have the two parties, the media, and it seems to have gotten a lot worse over the last few years, always tends to lean left. There's been plenty of Gallup polls and things done where the media is 97% liberal. And the other thing is that one party is never necessarily out of power. They may not have the presidency, but that doesn't mean that they don't have any power. You have a lot of powerful people that are still in that party, and that the media can still go to bat for and cover up for and do whatever other bidding they need done. And that's people in power, across the country. From you've got governors, mayors that are liberals, and you've got, senators, congressmen. There's always power there. It just might not be manifested in a presidency. And they argue that there's freedom of the press in this country, yet I get on Twitter and there's journalists, I use the term loosely, literally calling for Trump to be removed from power and Hillary to be put in his place. That's literally overturning the election, overturning the way that the people of the United States voted. And then you've got other journalists calling for a military coup or a coup where people inside the State Department remove Trump from power and take his power away from him and run the country themselves. That's pretty radical stuff coming from a media that's supposedly not being controlled by anybody. And I specifically remember people complaining about the Bush administration using the 9/11 attacks as a scare tactic for us to go into the Middle East. What is the media doing now? It's 24/7 trying to scare people into thinking. They're literally saying the world's going to end every other day. Literally, you have high-ranking people in the Democrat Party going on TV and saying that the world is going to end because of something Trump did. A lot of times, something Trump did that ends up putting the country in a better position than it was before he had put it in place. You've got late-night comics who don't dare say anything nice about Trump. You got Jimmy Fallon gets obliterated and comes out and apologizes because he supposedly humanized President Trump by messing up his hair and joking with him rather than bashing him and treating him like crap, I guess is what they wanted him to do. I don't really know what they expected. You're literally a host. You're hosting people and you're having guests on. You're supposed to be at least somewhat friendly to them. And then you got the whole thing with, and this is something that we should have noticed a long time ago as far as conservatives and basically anyone who's not a leftist. And that's the fact that anyone who is a conservative in Hollywood gets run out of Hollywood. And that's really wrong. Because that, obviously the biggest media platform probably in the world. And if you even hint that you're a conservative, they will try and destroy your career. And in most cases, they do destroy your career. And that is just completely insane. And I think really, even again, more than the news shows their hand every single night. They've gone off the deep end since President Trump got elected. But the stuff with Hollywood, that's something that I think was always kind of just brushed aside as, they're these rich elitists, producers and things, and that's why. But it's turning out to look like that's not really the case. It's more so they don't want certain ideas and things like that being out in the market. You've got the Roseanne situation. where she said something. I'm not necessarily defending it, even though I think that her apology was reasonable. She lost her show before she was even able to put an apology out. I mean, it was canceled almost immediately after she put the tweet out, and they cancel it under the guise of, oh, well, we can't have someone like that on our network and this and that. When, first of all, I remember when it was market correction. If someone said something like that, they'd leave her show on, and people would, if it was so horrible and so awful and so unforgivable, people would stop watching the show, and they would cancel it, and that would be the end of it. She wouldn't be on their network anymore. But what this was really about was they hated the show, and I think it was for a different reason than a lot of people think. A lot of people thought that they hated the show because she was a Trump supporter. She was openly a Trump supporter, on Twitter and out in public, and she played a Trump supporter on the show. But what they really hated was she played a Trump supporter on the show that got along with her liberal family members. They would take jabs at each other, and that was seemed like that's why a lot of the jokes were centered around. I didn't really watch the show that much, but they hated the fact that it showed a liberal and a conservative getting along, and their main goal seems to be to drive people apart. I mean, you've got literally, I remember Thanksgiving after, the first Thanksgiving after Trump had won, multiple articles why you should embarrass your Trump supporting family members, why you shouldn't talk to your Trump supporting family members, stories about why you shouldn't date a Trump supporter, all of this divisive stuff. And I really believe that they really hated the Roseanne show because it showed the two different beliefs getting along and coexisting, and I think they hated that more so than they just hated the fact that she was pro-Trump and said pro-Trump things in the show, and that the show was so popular mainly because she was pro-Trump. I mean, obviously, I'm sure they didn't like that, but I don't think it was the main reason that they were just looking for a reason to cancel the show. And then you've got, the other situation with like Chick-fil-A. The media tried to destroy Chick-fil-A. They conjured up protests. They were pushing so hard for there to be protests, and then it ended up being an anti-protest, and they flourished after the controversy, and then the media completely stopped talking about it. I mean, just another example of the craziness of, how in the pocket to the leftists the media are. You've got big CEOs. So many of them are liberal, and I never really understood. Recently, I've had some ideas that a lot of these guys are like, I don't care if they raise taxes. They're never going to be able to tax them enough for them to lose their fortune. And they know if things go completely south and the country goes to, socialism like the left's pushing for, they don't have to worry about anything. They're always going to have so much money that it's not going to matter. They're going to have power because they're going to be able to control the politicians that hold all of the power with their money, so they don't care. And then you've got the example of Elon Musk, who I'm not a huge fan of, with all his subsidies and things like that. And he's made some concerning comments about thinking they should implement a, government salary for everybody and things like that. But it came out that he had donated basically 50-50 to Republicans and Democrats, and they tried to ruin him. They tried to protest him, and I mean they're still attempting to, but it's kind of crazy how, and the media is always behind those protests. The media is always pushing those protests. They're always talking about the protests against the conservatives. I never see them. I don't remember seeing any stories about anyone protesting the Samantha Bee show after she made those disgusting comments that she made. And then she went and cried because people were mean to her on Twitter and people weren't nice to her. I mean, it's completely insane. Yet there was no push by the media like there is any time a conservative does anything remotely wrong, and they prop up these fake, most of the time what seem to be fake protests, and try and undermine the market just controlling things. If they just let the market control things, if what the person said was so bad, then they would naturally lose sponsors because they wouldn't have the same viewership, and that would be the end of it. But you've got these ginned up protests, and I don't necessarily even like the right getting involved in it because I think it's silly. It's not like It's not like we're going to watch those shows anyway. And honestly, to be perfectly honest, again, because it's a state-run media and the deep state, I truly believe, controls most of the media, they're going to keep these people on whether they make them money or not. They've proven that. They leave shows on all the time that don't make any money, that hemorrhage money. I mean, it's looking like, from what I can tell, Netflix might go out of business because they did that, because they were funding liberal bullcrap that wasn't making them any money, that people weren't watching. And then you've got the trickle down effect, that because all of this stuff influences the people, the audience, obviously, and the people that watch the shows, watch the news, all this stuff. And I recently got into what you couldn't really call it a debate; it was a conversation. When I called out and this was someone that was a friend of mine, and I called out someone having put one of the fake pictures of a child in a cage up, the one from the protest. And after being told that there were children in cages, and actually him telling the person that posted it that I was lying and that it was real, I responded by saying, no, it's not real, and I gave proof. And then I asked for proof of the policy that the Trump administration supposedly created that caused this situation. And then the response was, I don't care that the picture was fake because there are kids in cages. Obviously, there was no policy because there isn't one, because it's not real. And I was called a conspiracy theorist and all this stuff for saying that the Obama administration did the same thing, which they did. And that's the kind of stuff that's scary, because when you're willing to push and essentially believe a lie because you think things are so horrible that lying about it is an okay thing to do, that's a dangerous and slippery slope. Because again, if there are kids in cages and it's such a horrible thing, why aren't there real pictures? Where are the real pictures at? Just show a real picture. Why do you need, if it's such a horrible, awful situation going on, why is there no real picture? I mean, with the internet and things like that now, it shouldn't be hard to find. I mean, I've seen some pictures of the places where the kids are actually being held, and it's hardly a cage. And especially hardly a dog cage like that fake picture was showing. But again, when I see clips from these mainstream media news outlets, and you watch these late night shows, you watch clips from these late night shows, and it's not totally surprising that someone would have that mentality, because they're just watching that hours and hours on end, and they're doing nothing but nothing to check up on it, because they think, oh well, it's on CNN, oh it's on, it's this late night host, he's got people researching this stuff must be true. And I know it's kind of an extreme stance, but I truly believe that it's a form of brainwashing. It's you're telling someone over and over again something that's not true, and you're supposedly a reliable source. I mean, I remember having a conversation with one of my friends not that long ago, and we were talking about the whole fake news situation, and he was defending, like, well, if we can't trust the news outlets, then that's a really sad state that the country's in, and it really should never get there, and this and that. And my question was, well, how many times do they get to lie to me before I can say I don't believe them and you say that that's reasonable? Because that's something that I don't understand with the left, is they default, the mainstream media is always being correct and always being believable, and that we have to believe them, or it's it's the downfall of the country if we start questioning them and not believing everything that they say. But they've been caught in flat out lies over and over and over again, and it's like, how many times do they get away with that before not only myself as a conservative, but why aren't you asking the question either? I mean, I can show you a bunch of examples of them lying. Shouldn't you be asking the same question? Like, maybe I shouldn't be listening to these guys. And to be fair, that friend is someone who will go out and do their own research on certain things. But again, when they watch stuff, they're just taking in what they're watching. So unless they're told to, unless someone says something to them to make them question what they heard, they're not questioning it. And it's just, we've just gotten to a point where anyone who's a conservative, libertarian, anything like that, they're considered a dissident in the media. Again, I've had a conversation with someone, and they called me a conservative, and I made a comment about, well, I probably fall more in the line of a libertarian, and they gave me this look and were like, "Oh my gosh!" And I asked immediately. I was like, "Well, why did you react like that?" And they had no answer. They couldn't even give like a surface explanation of what a libertarian was. But they're just told conservative, libertarian, it's all bad. It's all bad. Everything's bad. The only leftist, liberal, those are the good things. Everybody else is bad. And the thing is, the fight's becoming more complicated because we're seeing in Europe, they have speech laws. You can't even say things. They don't have freedom of speech, but still, they're passing laws that they're actually arresting people for things that they've said. You've got certain states. I think California had a law that went to, I don't know if it was a state legislator and it got voted down, but they were trying to pass a speech law where if you called someone the wrong pronoun, you could get arrested and go to prison for it. I can't imagine that would ever stand up once it got taken to the Supreme Court, but I mean, it could cause trouble for a lot of people before it gets to that point. So, I just think we really need to address the fact that this is what's going on and put it out there to people and show them, like, it doesn't matter who the president is. Just because they're state-run media and state-controlled media does not mean that they have to be working for the president. They can be working for other people inside of the state who are in power. And again, with all this stuff coming out with the Trump investigation, we're starting to find out that there are people deep inside of the Justice Department and other places inside of the state that the media is doing the bidding for these people. And we really need to start calling it out to people and showing it to people and calling it what it is. I really wish we could get something going where state-run media became a thing and got put out there, because it is fake news, that is correct, but it's not fake news because they're not just putting it out because it's not real. They're putting it out because they're trying to push an agenda, because they're controlled by an entity that they're trying to get back into power, essentially.